right, we got to talk a little football, little Seahawks, little Senior Bowl, little draft. Ladies and gentlemen, from England. He joins us right now. Rob Staton, brought to you by Superior Linen Service, family owned and operated since 1926. Rob Staton's show is proudly brought to you by Superior Linen Service. Give him a call at 253-383-2636. Visit them at suplinen.com. We're going to talk about the Senior Bowl takeaways. We're going to talk about quarterbacks. He's got a lengthy write-up at SeahawksDraftBlog.com about 3 quarterbacks that he's got his eye on. You know one of them. You probably don't know the other 2. And we'll also talk about the Seahawks, a couple additions to their coaching staff, and, of course, the upcoming NFL draft. Canucks hat on. That's right.
Yes, big week.
I forgot you lived up there. You had lived in Vancouver there for a while. How is hockey a thing in London?
Yeah, we have quite a prominent British hockey league, and the team where I am in Sheffield is probably the most successful team in the country. They won we call it the Grand Slam, because you don't just have the playoffs over here. You have that the league winners get a trophy, you have a playoff winners, and then you have a separate cup competition. So they won all of the competitions last year, and then took on some of the best teams in Europe and actually beat some of them. So they've had a really good 12 months.
Yeah, so everybody gets an orange slice over there, huh? Everyone gets a participation trophy. That's what it sounds like, Rob. That's exactly what it sounds like.
Well, for some reason in our sports, we can't have just one thing. You have to have several competitions. I mean, the NBA have the cup thing now, don't they? So they
just copied European soccer.
Yeah, they branched out into that. So there we go.
All right. SeahawksDraftBlog.com. You got a lengthy piece up there. What I think happens next with Geno Smith and the 3 quarterbacks the Seahawks might target in the draft. We're going to get to that. I do, though, want to get your overall. You don't sleep. You're a vampire. You spend a lot of time watching the Senior Bowl. Just give me some overall thoughts on what you think of the talent coming into the 2025 draft based on what you saw at the Senior Bowl.
I don't think it was the best Senior Bowl in terms of the players available and high picks. I thought the 1v1 battles in the trenches were not quite as good as they have been in perhaps some other years. I think there's been a lot of hype about certain players. I think there's been a bit of reaching going on, and also some very, very busy agents. So, for example, Jackson Darts, if you listen to anybody in the media over the last 7 days, is going to be a first-round pick.
A lot of hype.
It's absolute nonsense. There's nothing to suggest that whatsoever. 15 of his 29 touchdowns last year came against Georgia Southern, Furman, and a really bad Arkansas team. He played really badly in key games. I went back and watched a couple of them after all of this hype against Kentucky and Florida. And no, this guy's not a first-round pick. And if he goes in the first round, good luck to the team that has taken him. So you're getting a lot of hype there. But then there were some real positive success stories. Do you like Chris Jones, the Kansas City pass rusher?
I like him. Yes, I'd like a few of those guys on my team. Yes, please.
Okay, so there's a guy called Darius Alexander for Toledo, 305 pounds, 34-inch arms, 6'4", rushed off the edge against Josh Connolly, the left tackle for Oregon, and beat him off the edge.
He threw him down too. Was he the guy that threw him down?
So, no, he wasn't the guy. That's Mike Green. But he rushed Connolly off the edge and beat him for speed around the edge. He was dominating with swim move in the middle, power, bull rush. He looked like Chris Jones at the Senior Bowl. And I know that when you say somebody looks like Chris Jones and they end up looking more like LJ Collier when they get to the NFL, you leave yourself wide open. But you can only call it as you see it. Athletically, physically, he looked like that kind of player. So I think he's somebody that deserves a lot more talking about, deserves a lot more hype than Jackson Dart deserves, and could be somebody that is very interesting in that, even as early as where Seattle is all the way through to where they pick in the second round. And then a couple of other names for you. Oluwafemi Oladejo, pass rusher from UCLA, shifted over from linebacker. Mm-hmm. The guy just looks like a dude, like an alpha, celebrated every play that he made and his teammates made, tough, physical, quick. Somebody who's going to go a lot earlier than I think people realize. And then Josh Farmer, defensive tackle from Florida State, just incredibly tough, physical. Spent the first 2 days just bull rushing every interior lineman back into the quarterback. And then I think after 2 days, they just said, can you show us a bit of speed? Like, try a couple of speed moves. So he did, and he won with those as well. Okay. So over the course of the 3 days, he was a real winner, and he's apparently going to have a great great combine.
Well, you correct me if I'm wrong, because you cover this stuff more than I do. The defensive line's a strength of this draft, correct?
Yeah, there's a lot of numbers there.
A lot of depth. Is there maybe not a lot of like stud players, but the depth is good?
Yeah, that's how I would describe it. There's not a lot of players that are going to go in the top 15. There's not a lot of Byron Murphys who just look like top 15 picks, but you have an enormous list of edge rushers, defensive tackles, and sort of inside-out rushers.
Well, listen, I think you in your mock draft, you have Carter going number 1, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just a I mean, Penn State was on TV a bunch, so I'm sure a lot of people saw him play. I mean, he's just that's what I want. And I know the Seahawks aren't going to get that, but God, I want one of those. I just want one of those guys that are like that.
I went back and had a look at all of the pressures that, the elite players in the NFL who are pass rushers, how many pressures they had in their final year of college football. And there's only one player who matches the number that Abdul Carter's just had for Penn State. It's Nick Bosa with 66. That's not a bad little name to be next to, is it?
Yeah. It's something about that number 11 at Penn State. God, they're all good. I mean, I know it gets passed down to those guys, but it's just he's just a fun football player to watch. And he just, one guy like that can just change your entire defense. All right, so what else stood out to you? Defensive lines of strength. Is there another group of a position that stood out to you during this week of the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of tight ends that really, really perform well. People know about Mason Taylor. He's Jason Taylor's son. And Jason Taylor actually started as a tight end before going to a pass rusher. Mason Taylor's going to stick at tight end. Okay. I thought he moved very well, but Elijah Arroyo at Miami was absolutely fantastic. We've seen him all year catching passes from Cam Ward. Yep. He's been such a reliable player, an explosive player for Cam Ward in Miami. And then he turned up to the Senior Bowl and defenders just couldn't get around him. He was just boxing them out, strong hands, catching the ball away from his body, just looked effortless with his roots. So I think Arroyo and Taylor really enhanced their stock. There was a safety called Keandre Jackson from Illinois State, who's a smaller school guy, who just looked tremendous as well. And then, look, I don't know if you saw the game or any of the game. I mean,
I did not.
You have to be a bit of a sado like me to sit through the whole week and then watch the whole game from start to finish twice, actually. But the final play of the game was a throw from Seth Hennigan to Besh, the TCU receiver, and his brother passed away in the terror attack in New Orleans a couple of weeks ago. And it was just the most emotional thing that it was a walk-off touchdown to win the Senior Bowl. And his brother's named Tiger Besh. And Seth Hennigan threw him the pass as time expired. The Memphis Tigers. It's just everything about it was just so. And then his uncle was on the field hugging him. His parents, his grandmother was on the field hugging him. It was just such an iconic moment and just one of those classic Senior Bowl. They're going to be talking about that. And they'll be showing when he's playing for the Rams and scoring like touchdowns like Puka Nacua, they'll be showing that highlight forever.
I love that. You already got him penciled into the Rams. I love it. What? Hey, you brought up his name earlier. I'm just curious. Offensive line. What did the offensive line look at if they address it? I mean, I hope they address it. How did Josh Connerly do? Because there's the video of, again, you mentioned he's getting beat around the edge. There's the video of him just getting shoved down to the ground. How did he look? Because he was coming into the Senior Bowl, coming into the draft as someone that, hey, keep an eye on, should be there when Seattle picks. Obviously, he's got a local connection. Rainier Beach goes to Oregon. Could he land in Seattle? It sounds like, just reading, that maybe he didn't have the best week.
I don't think he personally had the best week. Now, he won the award amongst the players. For best defensive lineman of the week. But I do think sometimes...
Offensive lineman, you mean?
Offensive lineman.
Yeah, sorry.
They win these awards, I think, sometimes based on reputation. But I didn't think he had a great week. On that play, so Mike Green, who was the guy who ran him over, the Marshall pass rusher, Mike Green I thought had a pretty rubbish week. Like, he kept going for this spin move all of the time, which was completely predictable. He was getting shut down. It was really, really annoying. And then he gets one play against Josh Connerly, where Connolly's on the right side, not the left where he traditionally plays. He got his feet mixed up. He was off balance, and Mike Green just ran him over. Mike Green didn't do anything after that. He went home after 2 days of the combine. They didn't tell the Senior Bowl they were doing it. His agent went to ESPN instead. And I just think it's a poor show, because people will go, oh, yeah, but he doesn't want to get injured. He doesn't want to ruin his stock. What we've got to remember here is, if you get invited to the Senior Bowl, somebody else doesn't get that invite. They don't send out loads and loads of invites. I think if you're going to go, commit to going. Don't go, have a pretty bang average 2 days, have one good play that goes viral on social media, and then go, see ya.
And correct me, right? He already had some issues, or at least some rumbling concerns about his attitude.
I think that has been there, and he is small. He has a Vic Beasley body without Vic Beasley's length. So I think good luck to the team that is thinking he's going to go to war for you. So offensive lineman Puck, I didn't think it was a blistering week from the offensive lineman, which I'm afraid to say from a Seahawks perspective, there was a few disappointments. That Wyatt Millen was disappointing. I think Connolly didn't have a
West
great
Virginia,
week.
Right?
Yeah, the West Virginia guy. Gray Zabel, who I really like, and it would be, I would love to lean into saying that Gray Zabel had an amazing week like everybody else. I thought he had some very good plays, and I thought he had some losses that people ignored, because once that hype train sets off, there's no stopping it. It just comes roaring into the station.
I can't even remember. Was Banks there from Texas?
No.
Yeah, okay.
No.
He could be there, right? That when they pick? Is he projected around there?
There is a feeling that he could go anywhere from as early maybe as 10 or 11 all the way down to Seattle's pick. I think there is I'd say there's probably a 50-50 chance that he's there at 18. It really depends. So Tyler Booker, who I think would be perfect for the Seahawks.
And he's from Bama.
The Alabama guy.
Yeah.
There's been a few mocks putting him at 10, 16.
Okay.
And if he goes early, somebody else is going to last. And Kelvin Banks is the one that in a few mocks has lasted to number 18. And he would be a good pick.
Okay. All right, let's get into your story that you wrote up at SeahawksDraftBlog.com. It's not the only one. You've got everything. You got a video breakdown. He's got a 3-round NFL mock draft. He's got his post-Senior Bowl 2025 mock draft, 3 rounds. He's got notes up there. Latest article, what I think happens with Geno Smith and the 3 quarterbacks the Seahawks might target in the draft. All right, before we get to the quarterbacks that you think they could target, we know one of them. We've talked about Quinn Ewers, but there's 2 other ones there. What do you think is going to happen with Geno Smith?
I think the more that I think about it, I think there's going to be a smaller market than perhaps people think for Geno Smith. I think it could easily be a repeat of what we saw a couple of years ago when he signed his contract. And I thought initially that there could be a big push from Pete Carroll and the Raiders to go and acquire him via trade. I think in the last week, it's been made pretty clear who's running the show in Las Vegas. And it's not Pete Carroll, it's Tom Brady.
Well, yeah.
Pete Carroll is not giving shit. Pete Carroll, there's always talk about Darryl Bevel ending up there, and they end up paying $6 million a year for Chip Kelly. And Chip Kelly's like BFFs with Bill Belichick. So that's a Brady-inspired hire. They keep Patrick Graham. It's not one of Pete's old guys that's come back to be the defensive coordinator. So I think Pete is in a very different situation. He's no longer running the show. I think Tom Brady and the new owners and the new GM are running the show. So I'm not sure how keen they're going to be to acquire Geno Smith. And there's been a lot of connecting the dots between Coach Prime, Tom Brady, and his son. So that might be more likely than I thought. They've spent some time together. Shadeur has studied Tom Brady all of his life, apparently, and they've had a connection there. So I think that is more likely than maybe I suggested in my mock to happen, because I think now we've established that Pete Carroll might not be the decision maker there.
Where did you have Shadeur going in your mock?
Steelers. So I had him falling quite considerably, and going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I think, if I was to do a mock this week, I'd probably put him at number 6 to Vegas, simply because like I say, I don't think it's Carroll who is the big decision maker there. So I don't know if Geno is going to end up in Vegas. And I know there are other teams that need quarterbacks and might be willing, but are they willing to give the Seahawks what they want? Are they willing to give Geno Smith what he wants? I'm not sure. So I think what will happen is, as we get nearer to the combine, there will be a compromised deal, and it will just extend the year-to-year relationship that the Seahawks and Geno Smith have.
Okay. So he's back. Somewhat good deal for him, but not probably what he wanted.
Yeah, I think probably a similar arrangement to what he was on before, with a slight bump, given that everything becomes more expensive every year.
Okay, and you promised me this is the year they take a quarterback in the draft. You got to.
That's my prediction. I've put it on Twitter with the full expectation that I'll be retweeting that tweet.
I am going to hold you
at the end of April. Yes, I think they're going to do it. I really think they're going to do it this time. I really
if they
think they
don't, man, you're out. We're finding somebody else.
Fine.
Okay,
you have my blessing.
All right. Yeah. Well, okay. So we've talked about Quinn Ewers. Let's before we pivot to the other two guys that you wrote about.
Yeah.
What did anything change? Anything to add on you like Quinn Ewers? Anything to add to it? What you've seen?
Well, look, I have a middle round grade on Quinn Ewers. I think the point I've always made with Quinn Ewers is I think John Schneider will like Quinn Ewers. And, I wrote a whole article about this a few months ago. There's a few sort of things, and I appreciate there's a lot of connecting the dots here. But Quinn Ewers, if you ask Quinn Ewers, his favorite quarterback is Aaron Rodgers. He's not saying that because he genuinely likes Aaron Rodgers. He's saying that because he thinks that that's his best comparison, that that's the player he needs to talk himself up to emulate. And John Schneider, back in the day, he loved Aaron Rodgers. Scott McCloughan, the former Niners GM, loved Alex Smith. McCloughan then went to the 49ers, took Alex Smith first overall. But Scott McCloughan has since done interviews, and John Schneider have, talking about this, and Schneider was a big Aaron Rodgers guy. Now, they are not identical. Rodgers is he was better at scrambling. He had his release in the NFL was very different to what it was in Cal, if you go back and watch that.
Of course. It was in college, he held the ball up above his shoulder. It was crazy. It was
above his head. It's right up here.
Yeah,
he's throwing it.
Awful.
It's really different. But in the NFL, throws very similar to Quinn Ewers. So I think there's stylistically something there. And look, I think I think he has had more success than people are giving him credit for, getting Texas to 2 semifinals. I do think the ball just bursts out of his hand, which we did not see any of that at the Senior Bowl. The ball bursts out of his hand from a standing position. He doesn't have to put a lot of effort in to get the ball downfield. He
flicks the ball more than anything.
He really does. It flick of the wrist and it comes out. And then the other thing just to point out is, again, this is not me suggesting that Quinn Ewers is going to be an excellent NFL quarterback. I embrace that at times last season, he didn't look like an NFL starting quarterback. However, some of the best NFL quarterbacks currently were seen as flawed. The Allens. Patrick Mahomes went 10th overall, not first. Plenty of teams passed it. Lamar Jackson lasted till the first round. It's about emphasizing the positive aspects of a player and development. And I think there are some teams in the NFL who probably think we can have a go at Quinn Ewers. We can see if we can make him the player that he was supposed to be when he was 18 years old. And I think his range could be, it would not shock me if he went in the end of the first round, and it wouldn't shock me if he went in the 4th round. That's the incredible thing. It could go that. There's so many extremes with what could happen to him.
Do me a favor and look at this guy on YouTube if you can. I wonder, when I watch Quinn Ewers play, he always reminds me of this old quarterback, and I don't know if he has the same arm strength as this guy, but the way he throws and how he flicks it reminds me of Jeff George. Do you remember Jeff George?
I mean, I know Jeff George. I've not studied Jeff George's his game.
Yeah. A long time old school quarterback, Falcons, and he reminds me, does Ewers, of how he throws, where it's not a big windup. It's like he's playing shortstop or second base in baseball. Is how he kind of throws. So watch if you can go watch some old Jeff George highlights, and that's who I think of. Just see if there's any resemblance at all.
I'll go and check it out after we've done this, but that's a good point about the way that he throws.
Yeah.
And there are a number of times when he's in the pocket and you think he's going to get hit, and then the ball just comes out really quickly. And there is a positive to that. But look, I've written a lot about the pros, the cons. My position on Ewers is simply that I think John Schneider and other GMs will have an interest in him, and that he needs to play in a system with structure. And the Seahawks have just appointed an offensive coordinator who is all about structure from that Shanahan tree. That's the kind of system that I think Quinn Ewers needs to be in. So I think it's just something to keep an eye on.
What about the 2 other guys that you brought up in your article, SeahawksDraftBlog.com, Will Howard, Ohio State, and then Riley Leonard, Notre Dame. Who do you want to start with first?
I'll start with Howard. I think that if you were watching him during the regular season, it was very frustrating to watch, very frustrating. But if you study what he did in the playoffs, it's quite exciting. I once spoke to a very, very experienced, successful former GM in the NFL, Puck, and I don't know what I'm talking about, so I have to ask these people what to look for, because I've never
know what you're talking about.
I've never coached, I've never played, I've never been employed by a team. I need to ask these people what to look for, and I feel very lucky that I get to do that, and it helps. And this individual told me that what you need to do with quarterbacks is go and watch every third down that they throw, and he would say, I don't watch anything else. The first thing I watch is I get a cut up of every third down they've thrown in their final season. And then I decide whether I want to go and watch anymore. And I can't do it that way because I can't cut up third downs. I don't have a team of staff doing that. But I will watch third downs. And the thing that I noticed during the playoffs with Will Howard was how many great third down plays that he made. 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9. You know, this is throwing from the pocket, not, he scrambled and he just got there with his legs. This is in the money moments of big games, season on the line, completing third downs. I thought that was really impressive from him. He's a strong runner. If you want to run the football and you want an element of this guy can get you a yard if you need a yard. Boy, the Seahawks needed a yard a few times this season, but he can scramble and he can break off runs. He has enough of an arm. It's not an elite arm. It's a good arm. His timing was a lot better in the playoffs. He's experienced. If you listen to Jack Sawyer at Ohio State, the pass rusher, talking about Will Howard, he hails the impact that this guy has had. There's almost a comparison to Russell Wilson in that his old team said, we're going to move on. We're going to go as the younger guy. He's gone somewhere else. He's had success in the Big Ten. And he did what C.J. Stroud and McCord couldn't do at Ohio State. And he took that team to a national championship. I just think as this process goes along, pick 50, maybe even round 3, if he lasts, that could be the kind of range where John Schneider looks at this guy and goes, I think we can win some football games with him. He might not be the answer, but I'm going to take him on day 2 to see if he can be.
I like Will Howard, but you're going to hear this because you heard this with, and I just drove me nuts. It just, I'm not saying that there isn't any, I guess, validity to it, but you're going to hear, wow, it's because C.J. Stroud was the same thing. Look at all the talent he's got around him.
Sure.
That's why he was successful. It's going to be a mark against him. So, I mean, Howard will face the same stuff. And, C.J. Stroud ended up being, where did he go, 2 or 3? I can't even remember. Well, whatever, top 5. But I don't hold that stuff against him. I mean, some people do, but Howard, I think there's a lot. As just a casual football fan, there's a lot to like about how he plays the position. And I love what that GM told you. We should look at third downs because that's where all these quarterbacks make their heyday. It's third down. It's their down to come through.
And sometimes, if we were going to focus too much on supporting cast, and you're absolutely right, people will say that. Let's not forget that Joe Burrow had the single best college football season ever, and he threw to Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson.
100%. And his running back was Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
It was, and and even Damian Lewis was playing on that team, Buck. Right, God. So we've gone a different way. But the thing is that he did produce, and he had. I'm just looking at the stats now. 42 touchdowns this year. So he did produce, and Jeremiah Smith is undoubtedly, like if he was in this draft, he'd be the number 1 overall pick. He's an unbelievable talent, but he didn't just go to him. Like if he had all of the touchdowns and all of the catches, you'd say, well, that's fine, but he didn't.
I was intrigued about Riley Leonard because when I think Riley Leonard, even though he's a little smaller, I think Taysom Hill 2.0. But give me your thoughts on Riley Leonard out of Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think because I've gone back and rewatched all of the playoff games again, and I think like Howard, he came into his own in those playoff games. I don't think he had an amazing game against Penn State. And I do think, unlike Howard, it's a bit more with the legs than the arm at times. But he also made some important third downs. And I think his ball placement of passes is not always great. I think there was even a pass in the Senior Bowl game, which was even completed and looked great on first flush. But then you look at the replay and it's a great adjustment by the receiver. His ball placement and his accuracy is not amazing, but he is a great athlete. He is a plus runner. He can be a bit of a difference maker with his legs. And then he does have the arm to get the ball downfield. He is not Mahomes and Allen as an arm, but he can get the ball. He can throw a 45-yard touch pass for a completion downfield. And unlike Howard, Notre Dame didn't really have the supporting cast. They had Julian Love's brother at running back, but even he was injured during the playoffs. They had a really good tight end, but he's a tight end that's going to go round 3, round 4. They've had a receiver who's very young and he's just sort of coming into his own, and they didn't have an offensive line full of first round talent. So he's actually done a decent job. And as I was watching him, I just thought, do you know what? There is just something there. And as much as John Schneider has gone on about his love for Mahomes and Allen Puck, he is also, let's not forget, traded a considerable amount for Charlie Whitehurst, talked up Drew Lock, and traded for Sam Howell. So I don't think he's looking for perfection in a player. I think he's looking for certain traits that can be developed. And it has to be said that Leonard has those traits. So I think, like Howard, from 50 to Seattle's 3rd round pick, in that kind of range, could I see the Seahawks taking a chance on Riley Leonard? I possibly could, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, it'd be intriguing. I mean, I think there's a lot of the intangibles that you like about him, for sure. You know, he's kind of he's got that smile, he's got that leadership quality that you love having from a quarterback. We'll just see if he can kind of refine some of the passing, because I mean in that game, especially in the national championship game, I mean he had missing guys like wide open, like throwing it at their feet.
He did, but at the end, he kind of came together for him at the end.
You did, yeah. I do like his toughness for sure. I mean, especially that first drive when they like literally leaned on him on every single play. All right, what else you got cooking before we let you go? SeahawksDraftBlog.com. What's coming down the pipe?
Well, I've been speaking to a few people today, and I have got some interviews lined up. I'm not going to say any names, but I have some of the players in this draft who people I think will be very interested to hear from. So I'm looking forward to getting into all of that. Some guys who impressed in Mobile last week. We may have even talked about a couple of them over the course of this half an hour.
When you interview these, are these guys that you think could be picks for Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, typically, yes. I like to try and interview one who could get picked by Seattle every year, and then more often than not, they end up with the Niners or the Rams instead, or the Ravens. So, or the Chiefs. There's a couple of guys who are playing in the Super Bowl, like Milton Williams.
Yeah.
For the Eagles, I've interviewed Leo Chanel, the linebacker for the Chiefs. I try and find these guys. And
how did my guy Kyle Williams look?
Oh, he was very good. He was one of the winners. Yeah, I mean, I should have mentioned him. He was one of the big winners. I thought the receivers running their routes, they were taking forever to get into the breaks. Like, just do something, try and get open. And then Kyle Williams would step up there, bang, immediate release, impressive, getting open. For me, was the most impressive receiver that I saw.
Good for him. He's just, I don't know where he's going to go, where he's projected to go, but he's going to be a steal. He's going to be a steal for somebody. Great. I interviewed him this year. Great kid, just likable, fun, but just a really good football player. And if people think Travis Hunter is going to go really high in the draft and one of the best defensive backs in the draft, I would suggest you go watch Wazoo's game against Colorado from last year and see what Kyle Williams did to Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter was locked up on him all game long, and Kyle Williams ate him up all game long. Now, is it unfair because Travis Hunter's also playing on offense? Maybe he's tired, but again, if he wanted to go up against the best, he had his way with him. All right, Rob, go read all of Rob's work, SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Rob Staton Football on YouTube. Go watch all the content Rob puts up there. And, of course, follow him on all the social media platforms at Rob Staton. Again, his weekly appearance brought to you by Superior Linen Service, family owned and operated since 1926, committed to delivering the highest quality products and service to the greater Puget Sound area. Give him a call, 253-383-2636. Visit them at suplinen.com. Thank you, Rob. We will talk to you next week.
See you next week.
There he is, Rob Staton. Full episode of Rob Staton up on YouTube. When you're there on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment. What do you think about the quarterbacks that Rob talked about? Quinn Ewers, Riley Leonard, Will Howard. Leave the comments there on that. And then the audio version of Rob will be the one big show of the Daily Puck Drop. Rob will also be on the full Daily Puck Drop show, but then we also separate him and just have his own show there as well.